Welcome back to Senate Education 225 on May 7th. Just a few updates before we jump back into our work on H183. The House is taking up HS100. I was there this morning for senators, just so you know, and they are considering the work we did and actually getting to it this year. I had thought maybe it would be more of a next year thing, but it looks like they're going to try to move it. So S114 literacy, it's left the editor's offices. It was delivered to the governor today. The Constitution for new senators, and just a reminder, is governor has 5 days to sign or veto or let a bill become law. That doesn't include Sundays, and it doesn't count the day that it is delivered, which puts it somewhere, I think, late. I think it would be 11:59 Thursday. So that's 114. And then we have on the calendar to vote to concur on S16, unless there are objections between now and then. That is on our calendar to vote. It was on notice today. It'll be up on Tuesday, but we'll take it off the calendar on Wednesday. And Senator Hooker is working on that. And then, of course, S115 we'll pick up our work on, and we're still waiting for S13 to come back to us. That is the bill on the waiting implementation plan. And I know that is in Ways and Means, and I think they may be voting it out today and put it on the House floor next week. So now we're shifting gears and back to H183. I visited with Judiciary Committee this morning. They raised a few questions that they asked us to look at, but in general, very, very supportive of the work that we did, and asked that we treat this as a committee amendment to H183. It sounds like it's still in appropriations. I don't know if they were working on it today or not, but we have Ms. Childs here. And Michelle, if you don't mind, just taking us through what I think we landed on 3 questions or 3 points that they asked us to have a look at. And I think you probably have already sent these to us.
I have. You should emailed a copy just a little bit ago to all of you, as well as to Jeannie.
Great. Thank you.
4.1. And I did highlight the suggestions.
Great.
And they're pretty short and straightforward. The first one being that you'll recall that in the makeup of the council, there were to be 2 college students designated for the council to be appointed by the Center for Crime Victim Services, one of whom had to have lived experience as a sexual violence survivor, and one who represents a campus-based racial justice organization. And the Judiciary Committee was good with that, but they asked that you consider that appointing 3 college students. So you would still have those 2 specifically designated for a survivor and for someone representing the campus-based racial justice organization. And then you would have a 3rd student, whoever they would decide, the center would decide to choose. Do you want me to go through all 3 of the changes and then discussion?
Well, let's do just one at a time, if you don't mind. We'll see if there are questions. And Jeannie, do you know what time Sarah is joining us? Oh, 2:30. Great. So any moment now. Okay, great. Senator Hooker.
Just a question, Michelle, on the language of sexual violence survivor. We changed the language to sexual harm at the beginning for the title, but does that?
Right. And, I would say I would defer to Sarah. I mean, I think typically when you're talking about survivors, and you're talking about the network, and you're talking about all this stuff, the term is sexual violence. So I understand the change. It's broader, the scope. But I don't know necessarily in all these individual instances where they use sexual violence, if necessary.
We have Ms. Robinson with us right now. Sarah, great timing. We have just started, and we are looking at the 3 points that Senate Judiciary asked us to look at this morning. We're on the first one, which increases the college student participation from 2 to 3, and Senator Hooker has a question for you.
Sure.
Okay, Sarah, we changed the language at the beginning to say Intercollegiate Sexual Harm Prevention Council. And I'm just curious to know if the use of sexual violence here is not being consistent with that, or if it's intended to stay as is.
I think it's a good question. I think it would, I think either works, frankly. I think that harm is probably a slightly larger bucket of potential behavior. So I think it would be fine to align that language. I also think that, from our perspective, we would consider even like something like sexual harassment to be a form of sexual violence. So I think it is a little bit interchangeable, but I do think that harm can encompass a broader set of behaviors. So I think it would make sense to change that language to harm.
Senator Lyons.
So I'm glad that Senator Hooker asked the question, because I was going to ask a similar question, and that is, it may be helpful, not necessarily within this proposal itself, but to have a definition that would give us the breadth of harm as compared with the more narrow word violence. And because harm for me, and then if you start talking about Title IX coordinators, you start to slide into discrimination. So there are 3 different areas, and then you've also mentioned harassment. 4. So 4 different terms that could come up that theoretically shouldn't be used interchangeably, I think. And so it would be helpful to have some parameters for each one, not necessarily a definition. But when you talk about harm, for me, it could be something like sexting, or some social media bullying of some type, or harassment may encompass that over time with repeated events. So, and then discrimination dives into sports teams and perhaps more general college-wide activities. So anything you can help with would be really appreciated.
Sure.
Because I think those questions will start to come up, and it could be that the group itself that starts working on this is going to start hemming and hawing about, what is it that we're looking at? So
yes. So
It sounds like, if I may, so it sounds like we'd be moving more toward a more broader category, like Senator Lyons and Senator Hooker saying, move it to harm.
And we would certainly be supportive of that. I do
Okay.
have, there are some definitions of sexual harm that I could share, if that would be helpful. I mean, one of them that I know we have used in the past, and I'll just read it to you. The term sexual harm encompasses all non-consensual behaviors of a sexual nature that causes a person to feel uncomfortable, frightened, distressed, intimidated, or harmed either physically or psychologically. And that would encompass a broader, some of those broader sets of behaviors that Senator Lyons just highlighted. And so I would be happy to send that to Michelle if that would be helpful.
So just to confirm, Senators, you want this in our amendment, the definition itself? I'm looking to Senator Lyons, and she first proposed it earlier on.
Well, I think it will be helpful for understanding. It doesn't. Yes, I think it would be very helpful.
Okay.
And Michelle, your thoughts on including this?
It's more, I think it's mostly a matter of how much revision do you want to do at this point?
No,
Because
I think, and that's where I also am just getting, because that means it goes back to judiciary. And I think we just need to be aware of that. Senator Lyons.
No, I think Sarah, if you could simply share that definition with us, then we know what it is. And violence, I think violence speaks for itself, but this is broader. And so we can simply say that when we're talking about harm, we're talking about additional behaviors that affect people.
I'm
And
happy to
Senator- And
share
Senator
that.
Lyons, you're comfortable with going to 3 college students, increasing the council?
Oh, I think it's
Yeah.
great.
Okay, great. Okay, so we'll do that. Michelle, we won't add the definition. And did you have a question?
I was just going to bring up is that, so you have the term sexual violence in about 10 other places in this section.
Yes.
So I guess, and you talk about survivors in other sections. So I guess the question, if you're going to change sexual violence to sexual harm in some places and others, then it indicates there's a difference in the, there's a substantive difference in using those. I just want to be careful about not using consistent terms if it would indicate that somehow there's a different intention behind them. So I would just caution you about kind of, changing some sexual violence to harm and not others, unless there's a specific intention to try to be broader, and then it invites the question of what is the definition or what is the distinction. I just don't want it to be inconsistent and confusing for anyone.
Ms.
So
Robinson, you were in these meetings this morning with Judiciary. You know where we're at. They were very tight in terms of not opening things up, and I want to be as respectful. So could you weigh in on this?
Sure. In terms of the student representative, I
Mhm.
think that one, changing that one in particular, I don't think makes too much of a difference in terms of the kind of substantive difference in terms of the student that you're going to get necessarily. I think some of the other places where it says sexual violence probably ought to remain sexual violence. I'm just thinking in particular about law enforcement who responds to sexual violence. I think that makes sense to keep that term sexual violence there. So I think that if there is that one change made about the student representative, I would be supportive of keeping the remaining language the same.
Okay, Senator Lyons.
yeah, so I'm looking, I dived ahead, of course. I
You have it down.
You're a good student.
shouldn't do that. I know, it's not good. But if you look at number 5 on the duties, it seems to me that one should be prevention of sexual harm. But we can I just want to identify that. We should let Michelle go through, and I don't want to stop the flow.
Okay, so right now we're at 3 college students, and we're in agreement there, and we are going to keep it as sexual violence, or we're changing it to sexual harm in this case? Ms. Robinson.
I think that either will work. And so I don't think as a matter of policy, it's going to make a significant substantive difference.
Okay. I'm looking to Senator Lyons and Senators Hooker. You're okay keeping it as Senator Hooker?
Yeah, I was just questioning it because we had changed
I
the
understand.
initial to sexual harm, but as long as it's understood that they're interchangeable. It was changed in 4 going ahead on page 3. It had been changed from sexual violence to sexual harm in that particular instance, but it's okay as long.
Okay.
I don't want to delay the process. Certainly.
Okay, the second one, Ms. Childs.
Is in subdivision C4, and that's on page 3, if you're following along in your documents. Small language tweak around, and this is the provision that UVM submitted for your consideration.
Yes.
And Senator Baruth raised some just questions around what is tertiary violence. And so they had a discussion, and Sarah was a part of that. And so instead of strategies for mitigating sexual violence and tertiary violence on college campuses, it's for mitigating sexual harm and secondary impacts of sexual harm.
Any comments about that, Ms. Robinson? You were in the committee this morning, and I think everybody felt good about that. And I said that I would touch base with this committee.
Yes, I know that Senator Baruth did think that was one place where that broader language of sexual harm ought to be reflected. And tertiary and secondary both mean after the event. So I think that was a good recommendation from Senator Baruth to just be very clear that it ought to be secondary impacts, and we're supportive of the language as redrafted.
Committee, any objections? Okay. The third one, Ms. Childs.
And then the last one is the sunset. And this is, I think, just an error on my part, is that the House version had a 7-year sunset because House Government Operations Committee uses an automatic sunset on new permanent councils and boards and things like that. And so it was 2028. And I think I just had a typo there and put in your proposal to Judiciary 2025, which is a 4-year sunset. And I explained that to Judiciary, but they actually liked 4 years much better. So they wanted to know if y'all would support that.
Yeah, I think we were talking, and I think it was Senator White who said that it's consistent with other reporting.
She said that the Senate has like that it's an automatic 5-year, but
Okay.
in House Gov Ops, they said they do it every 7 years. So they're doing it different, but the concept just being that you don't have these boards or commissions or committees that, are a great idea when they're created. And then, 15 years later, nobody ever meets anymore. There's no
Sure.
reports, that sort of thing. So
it seems to me, Senator Lyons, please.
No, go ahead.
No, it just, to me, it seems the sooner the better in a way, instead of pushing it out. So I'm comfortable with where Judiciary is, but I'm looking to my colleagues here.
They can always come back and ask for more time,
True.
right?
Sure.
Once they get started, it might be sort of reproduce itself over time.
So those are the three questions, and it sounds as though we're okay. Yeah, please, Senator Lyons.
I just had one other place that I wanted to look at, and it's number 5 of the duties. It's underneath the yellow of number 4. And I'm thinking, and this, I leave it open to folks, but I think the prevention of sexual violence, in that instance, I think harm works because we're talking about a cultural shift. And so it's the broader implication.
We have harm there.
I got prevention of sexual violence. Number 5.
Oh, I'm sorry, number 5. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Ms. Robinson?
I would agree with Senator Lyons on that
Okay.
piece.
Committee, everybody okay with? Okay. Ms. Childs, if you would be so kind as to change that to sexual harm, and run it by Senate Judiciary. I think it's a good recommendation, and you can tell them it was unanimous from this committee.
Sure. And I wanted to mention, so
Yes.
we'll tweak those and incorporate those changes into the amendment. And then you had mentioned, or Senator Sears said, he assumed it would be an amendment coming from your committee, but because you don't have jurisdiction, you can't do a committee amendment. So I was wondering who would like to offer. I mean, I can make it from everyone all of you, if you want to indicate it that way as individual senators. Although,
Is there anyone? I was going to start with the Chair of Health and Welfare on it, Senator Lyons, and then follow our names alphabetically, if Senator Lyons is comfortable with that, as well as everyone else. Okay.
and Senator Lyons, you would report that section? Or you would report the amendment?
You're muted, Senator, but it looks like you're a yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay, well, let me know if you need anything and, kind of any backgrounds or any.
I will. Yeah, no, I
Just
will
reach
reach
out.
out to you. Yeah.
Okay,
It's been a while since I've worked on Title IX stuff. but
okay.
you know.
And I will revise this. I'll run it through editing and I will send everybody a clean copy this afternoon, as long as the editing's not backed up. Otherwise, Monday.
Great.
Okay. Do we
And-
know, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think we were gonna ask the same question. Timing, it did, even if they voted out of approach today, it would be on notice Tuesday, maybe up on Wednesday,
Right, yeah.
or maybe
Yeah,
Thursday.
I don't think it's probably coming up in approach until Tuesday. I haven't gotten any notice from that.
Okay,
Something that you might want to either, connect, just to mention to Senator Sears or remind him or speak to Senator Kitchell, is that there is an appropriation in here. So while it's still in appropriations, they should be aware that there's going to be this floor amendment. And so, when they do vote it out, maybe they can just have that discussion about that money. And I have walked them through that language, even though it wasn't in the judiciary amendment. So they're familiar with it. So, but just to avoid.
okay, yep. Would you
A
mind
pile up on the floor.
reaching out on our behalf?
Sure.
That would be great. And you feel free to copy me and Stephanie, and then I can certainly weigh in. And Senator Lyons also should be copied on that, since she'll be reporting it on the floor. And if Senator Lyons, at any point you decide you just can't, or you're too busy, just feel free to. I'm happy to do it as well.
Okay.
But I think we're in good shape.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Sarah-
Have a nice weekend.
Thanks. You too.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Sarah, any information that you think would be helpful would be welcome.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I will follow up.
Thanks. Bye, Sarah. Thanks for everything. Okay. Last thing for today is to hopefully advance H106. I know that there were questions for the Agency of Education. The agency was not available to come today, but they did get back to both Jim and me. I'm still interested, if people are comfortable advancing it, because it will go to approps. And in terms of timing, we can always adjust. It is interesting. I just want to mention that I do think there may still be some concerns from the administration on this bill. I felt as though, or I'm still feeling as though we're okay. I feel as though we've addressed the memo from Dr. Boucher, but I'm not sure if it's 100% there yet or not. I'm hoping, this being the House's bill, they will also continue to work with the administration. If it's 90% there and it needs a 10% change, I'm hoping that they will make that change. But Mr. Desmarais, I'm going to turn the floor over to you, because you heard back from, you worked on a couple of things with Dr. Boucher, and I know you have a response, and I'm wondering if you would bring us back to those questions and let us know what you learned.
Sure. So for the record, Jim Desmarais, Les Counsel. So the question that was left open, I believe, from last testimony on this was around what does comprehensive supports mean and what does equity supports mean. So I sent the members of the committee email from language from AOE on what this means. So you should have this in your inboxes. But I can just read you, if that's okay, what she says. So she says that determination for eligibility for comprehensive supports is based on both current year performance on a series of academic achievement indicators and how successful that school has been in improving their performance over the past year. By law, every 3 years, Vermont identifies the 5% of Title I schools most in need of supports based on the current year performance and changes in performance from the previous year. Additionally, by law, any school with a graduation rate under 67% is also eligible for comprehensive supports. Currently, there are 15 schools with this eligibility. Supports include additional funding through Title I and close collaboration with AOE's Education Quality Assurance Coordination Team. And then she goes on to say, determination for eligibility for equity supports is based on equity gaps, and then performance gaps between historically marginalized students and their historically privileged peers. Schools that have a large and persistent gap between any historically marginalized student groups are eligible for equity supports. Currently, there are about 150 eligible schools. Eligible schools need to ensure that one of their continuous improvement goals addresses a reason they are eligible for equity supports. The AOE's Quality Assurance Coordination Team collaborates closely with schools for equity supports. And that is it from them on that topic.
Questions? So I too have an email from Dr. Boucher that gets to some of the timing questions. I'll also read and then share this with everyone. As you know, our position is still that this work would be better suited to occur after recovery planning has concluded. That said, it is good to allow for planning in the first year of the funding period. We can live with it. There still may be some questions about funding this with ARP ESSER dollars, but I think the conversation is ongoing and part of a broader set of meetings with Secretary French, Joint Fiscal, and General Assembly reps. The bottom line is that we're never 100% ecstatic about the bill and can't be given everything else going on regarding recovery planning, but we can live with it, and we do appreciate the committee's changes made in response to our feedback. We can implement the current draft should the legislature choose to pass it and should the governor choose to sign it. So that I think is pretty darn good, at least from where I am at this point. Okay. Questions for Mr. Desmarais? Jim, the most recent draft that you have for us to vote on is on our website. Any edits that I think there might be a couple that you need to mention to us? Is that accurate?
There are two edits on this draft. This is draft 7.1. And the first change is on page 14, line 4. This is the ability to operate. This says any school district or school, regardless of whether it receives funding under this act, may function as a community school as defined. And the change there was to change the word from grant to funding, because we're not doing grants in the bill. Secondly, the change on page 21, lines 8 through 10, which deals with the reporting requirement. And it says the annual report required under subdivision 1 of this subsection shall not be submitted if grant funding was not paid during the reporting period. I do want to point out two things about that, though. The first is that the report includes both the requirement of subdivision A and B. So if you look up on the page, A is information received from SUs that are reporting their percentage of locally produced foods based on their definition. That does not tie into grant funding. That's just a report that comes in that the Agriculture Committee likes to see. And these reports are going both to your committee and to Ag. So if you take the language that's drafted in 2, that report would not be coming into them or to you if there was no grant money paid out in that year. So I think that it's not maybe your intention entirely on this. So I just wanted to point out that issue with this.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I need to just take a step back here. So would you repeat the last bit of that in terms of, as it relates to grant funding not going out?
Yeah, let me frame it first,
Okay.
maybe a bit better.
Yeah,
So
okay.
Background. So the report that's required annually has 2 pieces of information in the report.
Yeah.
The first piece of information is on the percentage of locally produced foods using the local definition. Okay, that has nothing to do with grant funding at all. Just how much did you buy that was
Yeah.
locally produced. The second part of the report is about grant funding, is about the state definition and information provided to by applicants to qualify for that funding and the funding that was given out. So the second part deals especially with grant funding. The first part of the report doesn't. So if you have your language here in subdivision 2 that doesn't require the report in a year where there's no grant funding, then you're going to lose the reporting about the first part, which is the percentage of locally produced foods using the local definition, which goes both to you and the Ag Committee.
Right. So I think this was something Senator Perslick raised yesterday. Senator Perslick, what are you thinking?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point. I don't think I realized this section 2 had the one notwithstanding language in it, Jim.
Yeah,
Or
it's
the
well,
notwithstanding
yeah. So it
reference.
notwithstands. Now it's in subdivision 3 on page 21, and it notwithstands out 20, section 20D.
But then you added 2. Yeah, no, we would want them to continue to report what they're receiving from the schools on the percentages of locally produced food.
Yes.
And then even in B, that's the very first part of that sentence, the percentage of locally produced foods, because they take all the individual ones and give us a state number. So we'd want that as well.
Yeah.
So maybe my sensitivity to that was misplaced. They're already going to be doing an annual report regardless. So, not having them do that one section isn't as big of a deal. So if it makes it easier, I'm willing to strike that section 2 that you added in. I apologize for making you do it, but since we do a report every year anyway, they can add in the grants or not add the grants. I was just trying to avoid them to do a report if there was no granting.
Right.
Okay.
So everyone's comfortable with that, with removing that section. Okay. Thank you, Senator Perslick, and thanks, Jim, for raising that.
Yep.
Those
were the only changes, those 2. Yeah.
So recognizing that Mr. Desmarais will strike section 2, and that we would be voting then on draft
8.1.
8.1. I'm looking for a motion at this point to advance draft 8.1 of H106, which will then go to approach. Senator Lyons, so moved? So moved. Thank you, Senator Lyons.
I'll say it out loud. So move. Thank you.
Questions, discussion? Senator Terenzini.
Senator Kimmy, can I just explain why I'm going to vote no on this bill?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I love the concept. I think it's great. Great public schools are the cornerstones of our community. There's no doubt about it. But I think that I tend to agree with the Secretary of Education or Deputy Secretary of Education and others that timing is everything. And I think that there's so much going on right now with COVID and education. I think that we have to get these schools, in the fall back to 100% if we can, and back to some type of normalcy. We know the challenges these schools are going to face, and students are behind right now in many ways. Like I said, I love the concept. I just think the timing is off, and I think that there are some that feel that way. So I'm going to be a no vote on it, but it's got a lot of good stuff in it. So
Thank you, Senator Terenzini. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, Senator Perslick, would you please call the roll?
Okay. Senator Perslick votes yes. Senator Terenzini?
No.
Senator Lyons,
Yes.
Senator Hooker,
Yes.
Senator Chittenden.
Aye.
It sounded like an aye,
With an eye.
wasn't it yet? Okay, I was worried there. Senator Campion,
Yes.
5-1-0.
Unless I see someone jumping out of their chair to report this, I'll be happy to do it. Okay. Jeannie, would you please prepare a report so we can get it to the secretary this evening?
Yes.
And Jim, would you be so kind as to email this to final copy to Stephanie and Senator Kitchell and me, so that
Yep.
they can start that work possibly as early as I think they're going to be in there until 5, but I could be wrong. Great. Committee, anything else that I think completes our work for the day and for the week? Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Yeah, Senator Persley.
It's not, doesn't have to be the committee, people can leave. I just had a question that was asked me in education about this lax section, the section in here about the task force. I thought that was in S100. Did they take out so I guess I'm just trying to remember the process for the
All right, so you're
task
talking about
force.
H106, right?
Right.
Okay.
We added it to 106. We
Yep.
didn't-
So
I thought it
Senator
was-
Chittenden, do you want to mention why you wanted to add that?
Yeah, so I had a couple conversations with Chair Campion about this. Senator Perchlik, an advocate from Hunger Free Vermont, Anur, the last name's escaping me, reached out and was concerned that at some time there, it didn't seem like S100 was going to go anywhere this session, and she really wanted that task force to happen over the summer. And we saw a fit, and actually Chair Campion suggested a fit with H106, and since H106 seemed to be moving since it came over from the House, we thought that it would be better to make sure the task force happened this summer. And that's why we thought it would be good to put it in this language so that it would be sure to have that work occur before January. Anur Horton, thank you very much. Does that help?
Yeah, and so did we take it out of the other place, or it's in two places?
Nope. So what we ended up doing, just to bring us back, we kept it in S100, but at that point, and I said this to education this morning, but probably didn't articulate it well enough. At that point, we did not know if they would even take up S100. So we thought it should travel in both. We thought this bill and that bill, if they take it up, then S100, which they seem to be doing, great. But if it doesn't make it all the way, but we also have this, and we'll see what happens with this bill.
Okay, so it is in both places. Good.
It is in
It
both.
wasn't the committee, it was a member on the committee saying, oh, you added it to 106, and I was saying, no, it's an S100, so we were both right.
Yep. Yeah, sure. If that's going to make you feel better, yeah. Yes, absolutely. You both were absolutely right. Senator Lyons.
Yeah, so a quick question about the amendment for H183. So Michelle's going to send me a clean draft of that. Is there any reason why I should also share that with Senator Sears and Senator Kitchell, because it's got that little appropriation in it?
So I asked Michelle to do that on our behalf, and she said she
Thank
would
you.
copy, she'll definitely copy you, and she'll
Okay.
copy me. And if I see it and your name isn't on it, I'll definitely forward it.
No,
on.
that was totally a brain cramp. I do remember her saying that.
No, it's no problem at all.
Okay.
No problem.
Thank
at
you.
all. Yeah, no,
Okay.
thank you.
All right, we're good.
Okay.
Have a
Any-
good weekend.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend. Senator P, before you go, have you had your second shot? You're muted.
We're live.
Oh, we're still live. Jeannie, would you please take us off? if, let's just wait for Jeannie to me confirm that she's there. Jeannie, are you there? So, all right. There.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was, Jim sent me the,
Jeannie, would you
final
mind, we've adjourned. Would you mind bringing us offline?
sure.
Thanks.